Troy Zoning Board of Appeals. Call the meeting to order. And at this point in time, I would like to ask Mr. Evans to call the roll to show that we have quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Clark?
Here.
Mr. Courtney?
Here.
Mr. Desmond?
Here.
Mr. Eisenbacher?
Here.
Mr. Neal?
Here.
Mr. Lambert?
Here.
Mr. Sanzi?
Here.
So at this point in time, I'll just introduce the board and several people that are here to support the board's function here tonight. So to my left is Mr. Sanzika, who is also the Planning Commission's liaison to this board. He's a full member of this body. This is Mr. Lambert, is a member. Vice Chairman David Eisenbacher. I'm Glenn Clark. This is Mr. Courtney, Mr. Neal, and then Mr. Desmond. And across the table is Mr. Evans, who is the city administration's liaison to this board. And this is Mr. Frayne, who is Assistant City Attorney, who will serve as the legal advisor to the board in tonight's proceedings. So having said all that, we move on. Well, before we do the minutes, I'm going to call on Vice Chairman Eisenbacher to talk about the rules and procedures for this body.
Zoning Board of Appeals is a group of 7 of your neighbors appointed by Troy City Council to decide on requests for variances and other matters that are brought before them. A variance is a relaxation of the literal provisions of the zoning ordinance. Petitioners must indicate a hardship or practical difficulty with the land that would warrant the granting of the variance. The board will hear the items in the order that they appear on the agenda. When an item is called, the chairman will verify that the petitioner is present. Then the city administration will summarize the facts of the case. The petitioner will then be given an opportunity to address the board to explain the justification for the action requested. After the petitioner makes their presentation and answers any questions that the board may have, the chairman will open the public hearing. Any person wishing to speak on the request should raise their hand, and when recognized by the chairman, come up to the podium and sign in on the sheet provided. The speaker should identify themselves with name and address, indicate their relationship to the property, for example, next door, live behind the property, etc., and state whether they're in favor of or against the variance request, and give reasons for their opinion. Comments must be directed through the chairman. Comments should be kept as brief as possible and closely pertain to the matter under consideration. Only one person will be recognized by the chairman to speak at one time. At the conclusion of public comments, the chairman will close the public hearing. Once the public hearing is closed, no other public comment will be taken unless in response to a direct question by a member of the board. The board will then make a motion to approve, deny, or postpone the request. In order for the request to pass, a minimum of 4 votes are needed. If the request is not granted, the applicant has the right to appeal the board's decision to Oakland County Circuit Court.
Thank you, Mr. Eisenbacher. So now we move on to item number 2, which is approval of the minutes related to the last meeting of this board quite some time ago in December 2015. Are there any questions or comments on item number 2?
Move the approval.
Second.
It's been moved by Courtney Eisenbacher for approval of the minutes related to December 15th, 2015's meeting. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I believe we're prepared to vote.
Mr. Courtney?
Mr. Courtney?
Yes. I'm sorry.
Mr. Desmond?
Yes.
Mr. Eisenbacher?
Yes.
Mr. Neal?
Yes.
Mr. Lambert?
Yes.
Mr. Sanzi?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes. Item number 3 is approval of the agenda. So the agenda was available at the door here tonight and also online. Are there any questions from the board as to the agenda that was presented? Seeing none, we could consider that our working document for tonight's meeting. So we move on to hearing of a case. Item 4A is a variance request related to Rick and Janine Kazmarek,
Yep.
which is regarding 6714 Emerald Lake. And of course, this is related to the construction of an addition to the house. And I'll ask Mr. Evans to present this information to the board.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to direct everybody's attention to the overhead in the front of the room. What I have up there is an aerial of the neighborhood. This property at 6714 Emerald Lakes is located in the Emerald Lakes subdivision. That neighborhood is south of East South Boulevard and west of John R. In the overhead, it's property right in the middle, surrounded by the red circle. And I've taken that same map, zoomed in a little closer, so the subject property is outlined in red and overlaid zoning district classification. Everything in that yellow you see is the zoning single-family residential, R1D specifically, and that incorporates the subject property and all the surrounding residential property that you see on this overhead here. So it's essentially the whole neighborhood is zoned the same way. And I've zoomed in closer to give everyone an idea of the property's orientation relative to Emerald Lake Drive. It's kind of on a 90-degree turn with an eyebrow, and of note that the home is situated a little differently than many in the neighborhood. Now, this is the site plan provided by the applicant, and in this orientation, Emerald Lake Drive is to the south. And in the upper middle right hand of the drawing is, in dark, is the addition that they want to add on to the house. And the addition to that side of the house is going to consist of a new master bathroom and a closet. So we see the addition to the right and the existing residence to the left. And they provided us some elevations to give us an idea of how it's going to look. Now back to the site plan provided by the applicant. Of note here, a couple things. Number one, the proposed addition will be 9 feet off the side property line, and that's compliant. The minimum in this district is 8. The existing other side setback is at 4.7 feet. Now, the owner has done a lot of research, and city staff, myself, I've done a lot of research. It's not clear to me how the 4.7 feet came into play. There are no variances or special waivers, and the zoning setbacks were the same as required today. So when this house was built, I believe it was in the early 70s, the setbacks, required setbacks, were a minimum of 8 on one side with a combined total for both of 20. So the city views that setback as a grandfathered situation. It appears it's been there since the house was put in the ground. So specific to the variance, because they are adding on to the other side of the house and they're reducing the setback on that side of the house from 11.5 feet to 9 feet, today's zoning ordinance requires a combined setback for both side yards of 20 feet. The combined setback as proposed is a total of 13.7 feet, so they're seeking a 6.3 foot variance. And one thing of note, the applicant has provided a schematic that's in your packet indicating that if they turned the house and oriented it differently on the property with the addition, they would be able to meet today's setbacks. So with that, I'll turn it over to the board for any questions.
Mr. Eisenberg.
If you go back one slide, please. What is that curved shape drawn in there? Is that just a radius from the corner of the house, or is that a
I believe from
feature? I couldn't see a feature on the drawing.
I believe from the aerials that's some sort of physical feature, but perhaps the applicant can tell us what that is.
It's a paver.
Please, when you're called upon.
Okay,
Thank you.
sorry.
Okay, so we'll get to the applicant here in a second. Any other questions for Mr. Evans at this time? Or Mr. Frank? Hearing none, we can call the applicant to the podium and just ask, please identify yourself and state your relationship to the property in question.
Okay, my name is Rick Kasmarek. I'm the owner of the property at 6714 Emerald Lake Drive. I've been the owner there for it'll be 26 years in May.
Okay. Would you like to state to the board kind of in, not necessarily every piece of information you gave us in the application, but your purpose and rationale for the variance request?
Yeah, the purpose and rationale kind of was driven 3 to 4 years ago, with our neighbors. He's currently 90, and Grace, I believe, was 88 or 89. And they said they would never have stayed in their house or in this subdivision if they had not been in a ranch. And so I'm 57 years old, so I'm thinking about it, and I'm going, okay, we don't want to move to a condo, we don't want to move into a bigger home or a colonial to give us more space. And so we started working with an architect at that time trying to figure out what we could do. That's when we actually did this boundary survey, because we wanted to make sure where the property lines were. Our neighbor and I actually thought my left line on this side was slightly over, and it's not. That, the question that Mr. Eisenbacher had is, what is that circle thing right there? It's actually a brick paver walkway that goes from the garage around to the back deck. And so that was put in about 8 years ago. So when we did the boundary survey, our neighbor and I found out that is actually on the property. So Mr. McGonigal, Tom, our neighbor, and he's been my neighbor for 24 years, there's no discrepancy on it, and that if and when we both sell our properties, we've determined that we'll make the corrections that, because there's a tree in the corner. So when the landscape people went through, what they thought they had from an eyesight of where the property line was and what my neighbor saw, that was a fine curve, right, where the walkway would be. So if it's an issue when he sells or I sell, I'll cut down the tree and we'll readjust that paver onto the property. So going back, so we decided, okay, what can we do in the house? We didn't want to go up as a colonial. And then we looked at it and we're going, okay, the architect that we worked with started thinking that the best opportunity for us would be, and the most economical, would be go on out to the one side. To the back is a family room with a deck, and if you go back that way, you'd have no access then out of the family room on the left-hand side to the deck, if you extended there. And then you have a big, massive fireplace, where it says 21.0 right there. That would be a lot of construction and, again, and all that. So we're looking for just to give us more room. I mean, it's a 1,600 square foot home. We're just looking for a little bit more room for a master bath and for a walk-in closet, is basically, so we can stay there to we're 90 years old. And so our doorways, will be suffice. Our bedroom, if we ever needed at some point in time, a walk or something, we'd be able to stay in the house and live there.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for this applicant? Mr. Lambert?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Kazmarek, I saw in the one diagram that was up there before this one, it looked like there's a 6-foot easement on, must be the east and south side of the house. Is that like for drainage purposes, do you know? See where it says 6-foot easement there, right in the corner?
Oh.
Right.
I don't know, because the lake is up comparable to this diagram, it's northwest over here, the lake. And we've never had any type of flooding in this basement at all. When I first moved in, I had inspectors in, it's never flooded, never had a backed up sump pump at all. So I'm not sure what the easement
Okay.
is.
Mr. Evans, you think that's probably for drainage purposes, some kind of rear yard drainage?
It could be. I can tell you on this, it looks like there's a Michigan MBT, I think that's a Michigan Bell communications feature. I know
There's cable back there
Yeah.
too, sorry.
in general, when they do plant these subdivisions, it's not uncommon to see the utility easements put in while it's still on paper.
All right, thank you.
Back in that one corner, there is a cable box right there
Okay.
too, in that
All right.
corner.
Okay, thanks.
Anyone else for the applicant? So let me just ask a quick question, because I'm trying to, it is a very odd shaped parcel, there's no doubt about it. And your house being situated the way it is, it's kind of hard to understand. So I see the driveway, I think, going off of the
Right.
lower left here.
Yeah.
And then I see the porch to the lower right, is that correct?
Correct,
So your front door is there by that porch?
correct.
Okay. And then you have like a walkway from the driveway around the house to the porch, not
To
from
the
porch?
front, to the
Yeah.
front of the house, correct.
Not from the porch to the street?
That is
Okay,
correct.
gotcha. And, Mr. Evans, can we see you've shown it here, yeah. Kind of on the big screen, the one where it's not the rendering, or the drawing, but the actual picture of the property. Trying to get at is,
Street.
The photograph?
yeah,
Oh.
from the aerial.
Oh, the aerial?
Yeah, so, yeah, point to where the addition would be, Mr. Evans, if you would, that's okay. Yeah, right there. So that would be off to the side yard of the 6706, correct?
Correct. That's
And
correct.
what you have, is there any screening that you, I mean, is this neighbor at 67, I know we have the sheets here. 6706, are they in favor of your
Correct.
addition? But has there been any discussion about potential screening with, you know, trees or shrubs or bushes? Okay.
Yeah, there was no request. There is a tree between us,
Mhm.
a large maple tree between us. It's right on the red line. It's on our property.
Okay.
That gives them some type of screening. But the window that they have on this side of the house is a kitchen window,
Mhm.
and I don't think she wants screening. She likes, they talk about it looks like a park when they look out at it.
Mm.
Because we have a play set out there, the kids are out playing out there, and so that actually won't block their view at all. She said the only thing that will block is that we have a paver deck in the back. She said, so when you're sitting on the corner and you're having lunch or something, she won't be able to see you, but she says, we're not worried about not seeing you on your deck. As long as I can see your yard, she said, and see your, the pretty yard with the kids in it, which they still can, because we talked about this a number of times. I sat down with both Grace and Don with the drawings and all that also.
Right, okay. All right, if there aren't any other members for this, Mr. Courtney, go ahead.
Yeah, I just, while we're giving a 6.3-foot variance, it's really less than 1.5 feet from what the current is.
Oh, the proposed setback?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's going from 11 and a half to 9.
Yeah.
So
So
the
it's-
encroachment from what it is 1.5 feet.
Okay.
And it's only,
Very, very minor,
not the whole,
really.
not the whole addition.
Yeah.
Okay, sir, if you
Thank
could have a seat, thank you. I'll call on Vice Chairman Eisenbacher just to share with us communications for the public on this application.
Yes, on the table, we received 4 of them. One,
Yeah.
It's a little bit confusing because 3 of the 4 are signed by both residents of the household. So at first I thought it was more than that. But there's 4 on the table, which is both adjacent neighbors to the long edge of the house and the rear neighbor.
Is that 6711?
Yeah,
Rear?
6711 is the second one.
Okay. Gotcha.
6706, which I couldn't see. Oh, yeah, there it is. Yeah, and 6722, which is above, to the north, and 6721, which is diagonal.
All right, and then at this point in time, I would like to open the public hearing related to this issue. So if anyone would like to address the board on this matter, they can come to the podium and identify themselves. Seeing that there isn't anyone here to address the board, I'll close the public hearing and bring it back to the board table for further discussion or action.
Well,
Mr. Courtney.
I would move the approval based on the fact that the layout of the house makes it difficult to add on a minor addition. The increase, while the variance that we're giving is 6.3 feet, it's really about 1.5 feet less than what currently exists, what's been there since the house was originally built. There is no bad effect to any of the neighbors on either side, across the street, or behind, and I see no reason not to grant variance.
Second.
Mr. Desmond seconds Mr. Courtney's motion. And any other discussion on the motion? Mr. Senzika?
No.
I'd just like to comment that, you know, this isn't if you vote yes, in my opinion, on this motion, you're not approving someone's wish list. You're approving, in addition, that if the city had required this home to be placed, as Mr. Evans showed originally, kind of front and center and straight up north, south, east, west to the general shape of the boundaries, then this wouldn't be an issue for us. But for whatever reason, number one, the builder was allowed to place the home in a different, angle. And secondly, the mistake that was made many years ago was certainly no fault of the property owner. So I'll be voting in favor of the motion. Anyone else? Mr. Neal?
I would only add that and I think this dates back to the original period of development for the sub, that if you looked at page 8, which consists of the aerial photograph, similar adjustments for house placement at 6698, 6706, from looking at the plat overlays, pretty clearly shows us at least one or several variances, if you would say, or exceedances that were allowed looking at some of these homes. So I think all three of these homes that go along the curvature of this cul-de-sac from development has been given some form of waiver, probably originally in the planning stages. So it makes sense, I think, to allow this, so I'll be voting in favor of it too.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing no, if there is anyone else, I think we're prepared for a vote.
Mr. Desmond?
Yes.
Mr. Eisenbacher?
Yes.
Mr. Neal?
Yes.
Mr. Lambert?
Yes.
Mr. Sanzifa?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Corbett?
Yes.
Congratulations, you have your variance.
Thank you.
Have a very good night.
Thanks.
Of course, you can stay if you'd like for the rest of the exciting agenda.
I got a little
9-year-old.
Talk away with my.
Item 5 are communications. Mr. Evans, is there anything for us?
No.
Okay.
I
Thank you.
think you're,
Item number 6, any miscellaneous business. Since we've been out of session for so long, I figured it would just be piled up, but obviously that's not the case.
Only the papers that are on the day's commission.
I just have a quick question for both Mr. Evans and Ms. Dufresne. So I put in a request, and it's just one board member thinking it would be something very good for this board and this body, and I don't know that we've ever had an answer from the city manager, but I thought it would be wonderful if we could reach out to a certified parliamentarian to come and do a training, since we've had kind of like a light agenda for a while, to come and just do, a standard run-of-the-mill, here's the do's and don'ts of Robert's rules and so forth. And I've seen it before, and I've participated, of course, many years ago, and I thought it was worthwhile, very worthwhile. And but I don't think we maintain a separate budget for things like that. So has there been any answer from the city administration on that point?
I will take that. I did, Mr. Evans did forward your voicemail to me in my
Okay.
office. Lori's not against the idea, but as you mentioned, there isn't really a budget for it.
Right.
So Lori suggested that she'd be more than willing to come in and give a presentation to the board.
Okay, sure.
That was her sort of, her compromise.
Well, that would be, I think, well received. I just, having served on a number of public bodies over the years, I think it's like, if you can just have somebody who has, some information from an association that, does those type of trainings, and a lot of it's available online, quite frankly.
That was the other thing that Lori had mentioned.
Yeah.
They're
But it's really good for someone who's skilled, who's used it, to say, well, here's an example of this. I just left another public body that I had served on for, I think, 13 years, or maybe 14 years. And the city vice president, who was going to be sworn in as president after I resigned, said, well, he was nervous, and he said, well, what do I do? So I actually, the next day, just did a Google search and found some information, emailed it to him, and it was quite good. But, somebody obviously that knows the information presenting, I think it makes it more helpful. So, yes, if that'd be amenable to my colleagues on the board, to extend a formal invitation to the city attorney to come and visit us in the future, I think would be wonderful.
And she may do something like that. She may incorporate something on Google in terms of you have a visual and then you
Sure.
take questions.
That'd be great.
And as I said to Lori, because Lori asked, she said, do you think they really need it? And I said, no, I think they know exactly what they're doing. But if you
Well,
feel more comfortable,
I just have had questions, from various members, and I think the questions are good. It just means that you want to learn and grow, and professionally, it's good too, so. And then, okay, we will move on to item number 7, public comment. Any members of the public who would like to address the board, please proceed to the podium. Seeing that there isn't anyone here to address us on that item, we can just ask Mr. Evans if there's anything else.
No, there isn't.
Okay, anything else from the board member?
One-
Yes, Mr. Lambert.
Yes, Mr. Clark, thank you. I was wondering, this might be the perfect opportunity too. In May, I think, is that when we're supposed to do our elections. And if there's no business that night, rather than having us just come together to do an election, maybe have the parliamentary procedure education that night as well.
Yeah.
That's what we were just talking about with Mr. Evans, when, should we schedule it when there's nothing else going, or when we have a light agenda? So let me go back to Lori, and we'll figure out. if
The other
that
thing
makes
I was
sense.
thinking of, in addition to that, is maybe an update from city staff on what's going on with the master plan revision process, so we kind of know what's going on with it. Maybe Mr. Sanzika could speak to us that evening too.
Yeah. I haven't had, there hasn't been much lately about that. I know they're planning on doing several public hearings and reviewing it, but it hasn't come up yet, so should be coming up soon.
And I can talk to the planning director, Brent, to see if he can provide us at least a snapshot at minimum, if there hasn't been a lot going on, where we might be going.
Yeah, perhaps Mr. Savant would be willing to at least let this board know when some of those
Right.
hearings are.
That's kind of what I'm thinking.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Very good. Seeing that there isn't any other business, we stand adjourned until, oh, sorry, Mr.
I
President.
would mention one thing to you. I've asked Paul to get me another form on the, do you want to be reappointed type of thing.